I'm Louise Harrison, Sales Educator for Husqvarna Viking UK, and the following video is all about extra and speciality hoops that you can use on your Husqvarna Viking embroidery machine. And we're going to look at metal hoops. So there are 3 in the range. Now this very smallest one will work on all of the embroidery machines, so anything from a J35 upwards. You are going to, the other 2 do not work on the J35, the Topaz 25 or the Topaz 40, but there is a chart in the accessory catalogue. If you're not sure whether these will fit your machine, it will tell you. So what I may do is actually put up a link to that on the bottom of this when I actually come to the editing. I think that's probably easiest, and yeah, we'll put that on the resources afterwards. So we've got 3 versions of that hoop, so let's do the smallest one first. Now if you have a pacemaker, you should not be handling these. They have very strong magnets with them, and I understand, well, there is a health warning on here. Persons having a pacemaker should not handle magnets. I think that kind of says it, doesn't it? You also need to keep the magnets away from sensitive electronic equipment, computer discs or credit cards with a magnetic strip. Anyway, and don't get your fingers between the magnets because they are exceedingly strong. Now I'm not going to open that packet of magnets because I've already got an open packet in this one, so I'm just going to pinch that. There we go. Right. So they do have a life of their own, these things. They are exceedingly strong. So each of these hoops actually comes with a template, and if I just remove that a moment, you can see there's little bumps in the edge of, turn it the right way around, little bumps in the edge of the hoop to show you where the centres are. So if I pop that on there, the bit in red is actually the embroidery area. So that should make, let's put something white underneath so you can see. That'll make life a bit easier, won't it? There you go. So you can see the size of the embroidery area. Again, the hoop looks bigger than it really is. Just bear that in mind when you're planning what you're going to sew in it. Right, in terms of hooping, so let's pretend we're hooping that stabiliser. You should be able to feel the little nodules underneath to use the template if you want to, and the corners are cut away so that when you put the magnets on, you can actually take the template out afterwards, because you don't want to sew that, do you? Always remember to take your template out. I did forget once. Anyway, so I've got a couple in, that'll do, that's for what I want, and you've got a magnet on each corner. You can tweak it about. This is the nice thing, once you've actually got it on the machine, if you need to tweak it slightly, you can, because all you've got to do is lift up the magnets, not a problem. So we've got 4 with each hoop of these magnets. You can put up to 8 on each one. I don't think that's really necessary with a 100mm square one. I think 4 is plenty adequate, but we do sell extra sets of 4 magnets. So if you've only got 1 hoop and you would like to use the maximum 8 magnets, you can buy them separately. If you've got more than 1 hoop, you just pinch 4 magnets off the other hoop. You're not going to use more than 1 at once, are you? So that's fairly straightforward, I think. So out of all the hoops that we sell, I think these are probably the next most popular after the standard ones, which is nice to know. Right. In there. Put that one to one side. Right. The next size up, even the boxes stick to one another. It's a bit mad, isn't it? The next size up is a 180 by 130, and I'll put the white stabiliser underneath again so you can see. You can see the embroidery area on that, and again you get 4 magnets with it, and I can put those on the corners, and so you can take that away because the magnets. Okay, so you've got your 4 on like that. You may find you need to put another one here and here. This is where the extra sets come in handy, or the other box. So I can nab a couple off there and put them there if I want. Oh, and I could put another one here and here if need be. The magnets don't damage your machine. I know some people get quite concerned that the strong magnets are going to damage the electronics in their sewing machine. No, they won't. The reason we have a maximum of 8 magnets on any hoop is because they're so strong. Remember, you do have some metal components in your machine, and it is possible to put so many magnets on that the hoop won't move. So there's a very logical reason as to why you don't use more than 8. As I say, just be careful using these. They are very strong. If you get your fingers between them, it can pinch skin and it's quite painful. I speak from personal experience. And obviously if you got medical condition that says you can't go near magnets or use them, then you have to be mindful of that. So that's that one. Okay, and the very last one, the biggest hoop of all, is a 240 by 150mm one, and as you can see that really is quite large. Quite a popular one with quilters, this one. Obviously the bigger area you can do at one go, the better. And I have a quilt where I've actually used this to do quilting with. Let me just show you. So this is a whole cloth quilt that's been done on the in the hoop, using that hoop. Look how beautiful that is. So we've used design positioning to line up each block, and yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely super. Combination of different weights of thread. So if you look closely at it, the main detail is in a thicker thread than the background. This is almost like orange peel in the background. So it's really versatile and really easy to use. And the beauty of it is you can adjust it while it's on the machine without having to unhoop every time. You can actually just move individual magnets and tweak it to make it fit. Okay, so moving on. Put that back in there. So I hope this helps. It gives people an idea of what they can do with all these things, and that's what this weekend is all about. Making sure that you get something out of it to use the things that you may have bought, or you know, think about things that you think, oh yes, that solves a problem for me. It's great. Okay, so oh yes, what I did forget to mention, the metal hoops, we do some fabric guide sets which basically help to keep fabric out of the way of the embroidery area. And also we've got a hat hoop accessory so that you can do baseball caps, which you use in conjunction with the 180 by 130 hoop. Right, we have got some spring hoops. I think this is the only one that's in the current catalogue, the small one, but I appreciate that some of you may also already have this one. This one has been discontinued now, but if you still got it, you'll still want to use it, won't you? So I am going to show you briefly how these work. It's more like a traditional embroidery hoop. So that's the two parts. You've got the bit that fits to your machine, and you've got the bit that holds everything together in the centre, and it basically clips in like that. So if I use our same bit of stabiliser to show you, put that on the top. There is a little recess where the handles of the hoop go, so just make sure you've got it in the right way round. You place that on the top, squeeze together and let go, and just make sure it's all seated. And yeah, really nice fit. So that's quite a good one for clothing actually, and more awkward to hoop items. There is a template as well for it, so that will help you. Again, you can mark your centres and each of the 4 directions with it, and it will give you a good idea of what the embroidery area is. When you store these, don't store them with those inside. Store the 2 parts separately, so stops them getting strained. And this one is a baby version. So again, there's the actual frame itself. If you turn it over, you can see where the recess is, just here. So when you put the actual hoop in, it needs to be that direction that it sticks out, and that can be used on a jade 35 will take that hoop. So oops, get in, thank you. Just make sure it's seated. That's it, all gone in. And again, we've got a dinky little embroidery template. That's 40mm square that will embroider, but that's good enough for a monogram or something like that on a piece of clothing. And obviously on children's wear you can do all sorts of small decorations with that if you need to. So that's the spring hoops. Really useful, that. Okay. Then we go on to the texture hoop. So the idea of the texture hoop is you can actually embroider over things you've laid in the hoop. So you get out the box. Bit of a weird one, this, a bit unusual. Okay, so you've got the instructions. So, and you've also got some designs as well. If you look on the back, it gives you some idea of some of the designs that are included with it. There are always some of these specialist designs in the machines as well. If you check them out, that's always helpful, because you're not having to buy designs necessarily to use with them. Right, so that's our hoop. Just undo the release. The release clip's slightly different on this one. It's got a plus and a minus on it. That's closed, but if you find that you can't close it, to make it bigger, go towards the plus sign. To make it smaller, go towards the minus sign. But that should self-explanatory. I'm just going to again use this bit of stabiliser so you can see. Just for the purposes of, yeah, that's shut all right. Okay, so say that's our fabric in the hoop. The idea is we've got a template, and again we've got this bit at the back where we can't actually embroider in the hoop because of the space taken up by the foot and the mechanism of the machine. We've also got some clips. There's some corner ones. I'll put those out there. They're quite big, obviously they fit around a corner. And we've got some ones for on the straight. Okay, and there is a little clip remover as well. Keep that handy because they're a devil to get off if you haven't got that. So the idea is you can put whatever you like in here. So if I take that out, these clips fit along the edge, so you can clip things to the hoop, and then when you want to take them off, you use the little tool. It's got this little wire bit that you can just hook underneath and pull the clips off. So we could do, one of the basic things you can use is ribbon. So what I could do, I can just sort of clip them on roughly to start with, and what you'll need to do is just put your nail in there just to keep that, because you want it to be tight but not pulling too much, if you're with me. It wants to be relaxed. Okay, so I've put that in there. I've no idea whether it's straight or not, so I'm going to put my template in. Okay, so can you see we've obviously got these marking holes as well, so we can mark onto our fabric or our stabilizer first if we want, but I think that needs to tweak a little bit. You can slide these along, so if your ribbon isn't quite in the right place, you can actually tweak it so that it is. I think that's not too bad. It'll do for the purposes of what we're doing today. Okay, so we can also do cross corner. We could do lots of stripes of ribbon, but I'm going to use one of these corner pieces and show you how they work. So I'm just going to put that in. You might need to just adjust it before you put the second side on. And remember, I don't want to actually come up to this corner because I can't embroider in this corner. If we look at the template, we need to come over here. It's actually slightly down the side, so I use a straight clip on that one. If you look at these clips closely, one side of the clip is longer than the other, so the longer side needs to go on the inside of the frame, so that it's, because one side's higher than the other. So let's just make sure we've got that right. Yeah, I'm happy with that, and I'll just pop the clip on. There we go. And you carry on like that until you've got the arrangement you want, and then you can use some water soluble film or some iron away film on the top. Just trying to find some. Here we go. This sort of thing, and I'm going through stabilizers later, so we'll go through all these. You can just put a layer of that on the top so that your embroidery foot won't catch any of the embellishments that you've put on top of your fabric, and now you can actually embroider your design on top of all that and couch it down. So if you want to see something I made earlier, I had something here. So this was actually a free pattern for a mug rug until I changed it into a machine needle case. So that's all for keeping my machine needles all neat and tidy and where I can find them. But these have all been done with a texture hoop. There's some organza ribbon there. I've put some gold lame ribbon. There's even one which almost has lumps of glitter in it. Actually, it's quite spectacular. The one underneath there is organza with a gold edge, so you can really bling it up. I mean, you know, I don't know if you can catch the sparkles going on there. Yeah, but that was a free design on the Epic on the blog a little while back. So yeah, you can do all sorts. So yeah, that's the texture hoop. So catch all my little bits and pieces and put that to one side. In actual fact, let's just show you how to take all these off. So take all those little clips away. As I say, almost impossible to do that without the proper tool for the job, so make sure you don't lose it. Okay. next thing I'm going to look at is the endless hoops. Now, these are really good for borders or strips or anything where you want to do a long line, and yeah, anything along the line. You'll all have endless designs in your machines which are have location marks so that you can match up the designs and do them all in a long row. There's two sizes. These won't fit on the hoops that take the standard 150 by 240 hoops. They're too big, the mechanism's too big unfortunately, but it should work on the others. And then obviously the bigger machines will take the mega endless hoop. You can see there's quite a difference in size. The bigger one also comes with some hoopies, which is slightly tacky. It helps to grip around these edges and stop your fabric sliding out. Because it's a much bigger hoop, you obviously want to preserve the tension as best you can. So I'm going to actually put that one back in the box and work with the smaller one. They all come with designs with them as well, so you've got some extra. We did design packs. If you're a subscriber to the My Sew-Net library, there's loads of designs in there for it. And if you have the software, you can digitize the marks to match up the patterns as well, which is really useful. So okay, so let's have a fresh bit of stabilizer. Let's push the boat out. Right, skizzers. Okay, so turn that around so it's the right way around for you. So this is the bit that fits onto the arm of your machine. You have a lever at the front here which opens it up, it's hinged, and your stabilizer goes in like that, and there's like a stop at this side. So if you just get it pushed in, pull that lever up, firmly shut it, and that is it hooped. That's it. No more complicated than that. Now what I normally do, because if you're going to do a long strip of something, you want to make sure that you're going to get it straight. So I normally iron my fabric in half, and because it's stabilizer, it'll take a crease. I'm just going to fold that in half like that. So now I've got a line running top to bottom, so I'm going to use that line to match up all the way down my design. So if we now take that to our hoop, now I have to think about which way around to do this. I need to start at the top end. Okay, we're hooped. Okay, now can you see my ironed line? It isn't quite straight, so let's just adjust that. So you can just lift it slightly so it's still gripping the fabric a bit, and just get it lined up. Oops, lifted it too much then. Okay, I'm happy with that now. And what I generally do is with a pencil or something else that will come off, I mark my hoop where my ironed line is, because as I go down the strip of fabric, I can make sure that ironed line always lines up with those two marks, and then I know I've got it straight. So I'm going to move to the sewing machine now, the embroidery machine should I say, and we'll show you how it actually goes on. Now when you look at this, can you see there's a slot at the top end here? This is quite important because this, you need to put that slot where the embroidery foot is when you put it on the machine. So if I slide it in there, can you see my sensor cue foot has just gone through that gap? If I try and put it on here and the machine is at its lower height, it won't go through, but it will if I use that little channel there, so that's quite important. Right, let's press go. I'm just going to stitch on the stabiliser. I'm not going to worry too much about the fabric. So when you're selecting your hoop and you're using an endless hoop, the hoop size should have an E on the end, which will help. It won't recognise it if you've not picked the hoop with the E on the end. I think all of them are different sizes to the standard hoops anyway, so that hopefully shouldn't be too much of a problem for anybody. Right. Oops. Little bit drunk there with the camera. Right. Okay, so it's ready to go. Let's just, I think we'll get that to stitch in monochromic and do it all at one go. That one. Right, so I'm just going to quickly stitch one out and then you can see how it works from then on. So it's going to start at the top of the design. That's it. Now if you thought this was a little bit soggy when you first hooped it, don't worry about it, because I don't know if you can see, it's actually pressing quite hard down on the fabric as it's sewing. It's almost a bit trampoline-like, so don't worry too much if it's a little bit slack. It won't be when it's actually stitching. Okay, so now it's going to do its next alignment stitch, so that when I start the next repeat, I've got something to match up to. Okay, so it's finished that one. Now this is the bit I love about this. Okay, so check this out. That's it. Right, so if I just release this now, I don't have to take the hoop off. I can just slide it. I can just slide the fabric through the hoop. I'm going to get it roughly in the right place. You can use design positioning to get this right, but you know, you don't have to. Back this way a bit, make sure I've got it straight. Yeah, I've just gone a tiny bit too far back. There we go. I think that's about right. And tighten it up. And I'm going to check these marks that I made on my hoop, front and back. Looking good. Just drop my needle down. Yeah, that's in the same hole. And I'm just going to set it going again. So this is your last visual check when it does that at first. So I've taken that out, having done two of the designs, and you can see how those link up, and these little alignment markers, they're big stitches, they just whip straight out. So let's put that on the table so you can see it a bit better. There we go. So you can imagine you've got a whole line of these coming down together. You get a really nice border. So what I'm going to do now is just show you, well, another Blue Peter moment, one I did earlier. So here it is. This is a machine embroidered quilt I've done. It's our marigold design by a lady called Janet Sanson, and these border pieces are all done in the endless hoop. So if you look at where that starts, I think the joint's about there, and then there's another one about there, and the sides I think were 6 repeats. So you can see it goes on over the other side, and the top and bottom being a bit narrower, or not quite as long, we're 5.5 I think, or 5, but it just shows you what's possible with a hoop like that and how easy it is to use. If you were actually having to rehoop that in a conventional hoop, you've got to get it straight, you've got to manage the pull on the fabric. It can be quite difficult, especially if you've not got an awful lot of room to actually get these sort of endless designs hooped up accurately, and those endless hoops make it really, really easy. So yeah, rather proud of this one, I have to say. Yeah, quite a thing. It's a king size. Never go for anything small. Why not? So let's move that out of the way. That also. I won't spend long on these next ones. These are hoops that do well for quilters. I'll come to this one in a second. But we have two sizes of quilter hoop. They are just like a conventional hoop. This one actually has some extra designs in it, which you can see on the box. Again, you get a template with it. That's a 200mm square one. Square's obviously more used to a quilter than a rectangular one. That's why we do them. And that again has a template with it that you can use, showing the bit that you can't embroider in at the top, so it's always useful to have. And then moving on from that one, this one only fits the epics, but you'll see why when you see the size of it. Absolutely huge. This one's 260 by 260mm. Again, obviously a square area, but actually I use this one ever such a lot. And again, I've got a quilt I've made with this one where I actually did the quilting and the hoop, and again it's a king size. I am a sucker for punishment, so let's just have a look at that. So here we have it. So all the quilting on this has been done in the hoop. So it was a group of 4 circles at a time, and I've used design positioning to line it up each time, plus a little bit of tugging and what have you here and there if it didn't quite line up. This, of course, because it's a quilt, didn't need stabilizer. The thickness of the backing and the wadding and the quilt top was enough to support just a running stitch design. So you don't always have to use stabilizer, but most fabrics, if you're just embroidering onto fabric, whatever it is, it's going to need something behind it. But with a quilt, you can actually get away without it, so no need for stabilizer. What you do need to think about though is altering your tension, because on a quilt what you want is nice stitches on the bottom and the top, whereas conventionally on an embroidery machine you would want the top thread pulled through to the underneath at a certain extent so that there was no chance of bobbin thread showing on the top. So it's a little bit of a different balance between quilting and conventional embroidery as far as the tension's concerned, but that's the sort of thing you can do with it. And yeah, took me a wee while, but I mean, you know, it looks like it's been long armed, doesn't it? So you can do really, really complex designs. That's the beauty of an embroidery machine. You don't necessarily have to be an expert quilter to be able to produce some really, really stunning designs. And obviously the one we looked at that was done in the metal hoop, the whole cloth quilt, is an example of that. There is no way on earth I could actually produce something that looked like that freehand. So yeah, it really, really useful tool for quilting. Right, so the last one to show you is the Do-All Quilters hoop. Now this one's a little bit unusual because it's actually an outer hoop. I've obviously got some instructions, that helps. It's an outer hoop with 2 different sized inners. So the idea is we've got one that says light and another that says heavy. They're two different sizes to fit into this outer hoop, and the idea is we've got one hoop in her that will coat with thin things like organza, that's the light one, and then we've got another that will coat with thick things like a quilt sandwich. I don't know if you could see that. So the heavy one is a looser fit than the light one. Now, you know what we were saying about, yeah, so that will hardly go in. That's the light one. That's a very snug fit. So, you know, we were saying about the sides of the larger hoops and using the clips to stop them bowing. On a small hoop, that's much less likely to happen. There's much less give in it. So that's why we've got a 150 square hoop with those two different inners. And we've also got a template, and because this is aimed at quilters, all these lines are about, well, they're not about, they are an inch apart. If we put that on our cutting mat, that fits quite nicely, thank you very much. And it's got the slots in it so that you can actually mark out where you want it to go before you put your quilt in the hoop as well. So really, really useful for quilters. On the smaller side, obviously, if you want bigger hoops, you need to have a bigger machine as well. So you know, not everybody can take a 260mm square hoop on their machine. So there's something for everyone there in terms of being able to quilt and having the right tool for the job. So the very last hoop I'm going to show you is the Majestic hoop. Now, we get asked about this quite a lot. It's a little bit different. If I open up the box, you've got hoop, some clips, there's obviously instructions and a CD in there with designs and so forth on. I'm going to move the box out of the way and we're going to have a look at the hoop itself. Okay, so let's turn that round. That's the way we turn the hoop, right way round. So I've got Husqvarna Viking at the top. I've made sure I've got that the right way round. So this hoop's unusual because it has two attachment points to go on the machine. The idea is you put it on the machine, this side, and you do this side of the design, and then you spin the whole thing 180 degrees. It's put on the machine with that side, and you do the other half of the design, and the whole thing can be done without having to re-hoop. You've got two quick releases, and what I'm going to show you, I normally float with this hoop, and I'm going to explain to you why, because it does make the joining up of the two designs, which is what makes your whole design, a lot easier. So let me just get some stabilizer. Right, that's a piece of polymesh stabilizer, almost translucent and very thin, but it's a cutaway, so that's very, very good for this actually. So I'm going to put my hoop in. I'm going to just do up to two quick releases. It's trying to sort of do it with it shut is probably not as easy, so let's just make sure we've got all that flat. I think we have. Let's just do up the screws and then do the other one. Now, having done all that, you can see, if I pull that, you can see all the stabilizer moving. This is so large, you really need to use the clips on the edges, and that's one of the reasons I only hoop my stabilizer in this, because that makes it far easier to get the clips on. So we'll just quickly put all those on, just the same as the other clips on the other hoops that we tried. Again, if you need to snip the stabilizer just to keep this clear, we can do that afterwards before we put it on the machine, but once we've got all these clips on. So Holds everything out of the way really well, doesn't it? And there's much more of these clipping points on here, which again, they've got such long sides, you need to make sure you've got plenty of these on. Okay, I'm just going to spin that. Okay, that's that all sorted. So we've got our stabiliser hooped. If I'd put something thicker in there, if I'd actually put stabiliser and the fabric was fairly substantial, these two screws would have to be much looser, and the end result of that, if you push these clamps apart, it actually pushes the two outer halves of the hoop apart, and by default the two fixing points for the hoop on the machine. Now when you remember that we have a gutter down the middle where you have the overlap of the two designs so that they can mesh and they can join together, if these two pieces are further apart, that means that overlap in the middle is less, so it gives us less adjustment to match up when we turn the hoop. And what I'm going to show you first is I'm going to baste my fabric to the hoop. I've got some fabric, which you're very honoured, I've ironed this. So if we put that in the hoop, I'm going to float that. So I'm going to take it to the machine and do the basting stitch on one half and then the other half, and I'm going to show you what the gap is in between once I've done that. So we've come over to the machine. I've loaded up a design on the screen. It's just a plain quilting design. I'll show you. So that's our design on the screen with the grey bit showing the overlap in the centre. So I'm going to show you how to do the basting. I'm going to press go, and we've got selected hoop 360 by 350, and right at the bottom right here we've got turntable hoop side sort. So that lets you embroider all designs on one side of the hoop before you turn it and do the other side. So I'm going to tick that box as well. We've got sensor cue, straight stitch plate, yep, that's all fine. And we're going to do based around the hoop as well. Now whether you've got a diamond, a sapphire 85, a brilliance 80, an epic 2, all this will work the same way. You can do the basting in two halves and then go back and do your design afterwards. So right, it says attach hoop, and it's recognised the hoop, and the first thing I have to make sure of, you can see this takes up an awful lot of room, so I am going to make sure that I've got enough clearance at the back and I'm not going to actually hit anything, so just bear with me one moment. Okay, that should be fine. So I've now got two fix or basting lines on my colour screen. So I'm going to let it do one side. I'm going to smooth it as I go. Bits of fluff everywhere. So this is where it's important just to make sure everything sits flat. Get halfway across and just stop. So now it says to remove and rotate the hoop, attach the other side to the embroidery unit and make sure it clicks into place. So let's just clicked in. So the hoop's now upside down, so don't worry too much when you come to your design. One half will stitch upside down because you've had to turn the hoop round. So, right, let's do the other fixed stitch. Okay, wants us to remove and rotate the hoop. That's why it's gone to the centre again. And we can now... You need a bit of room to do this. There we go. So I can answer that. And we've now gone to the colour block list for the two halves of the design. We've finished the basting. But can you see we have a little gap at the front here? So if I just tip that down slightly, where these two halves don't meet, so that gives you an indication of what the gap between the two sides is. You will never turn this round and not have to do design position. It's exceedingly unlikely, but this gives you an idea of how much you've lost of that 30mm gutter in the centre and whether you're going to be able to line up or not. So what I'm going to do, let's have a quick look at the actual design itself and how it's split. So just to recap, this was our design that we loaded onto our screen, and this is the gutter or the overlap down the centre, which allows you to line up and match the two designs. And if we click on go, that takes us into the stitch out screen where we've got based around design and the turntable hoop side sort selected, as well as things like the sensor Q foot and the straight stitch plate and obviously the correct hoop. And you press continue, that takes you into the stitch out screen itself, and that's our two basting stitches, which it's going to do in two halves, and we're going to turn the hoop round halfway. One thing to notice is that these look as if they actually almost meet. They don't quite, but your gap, like mine, might end up a little bit bigger than that, and that obviously reduces the amount of overlap you've got in the centre. So that's why we've hooped with something quite thin in terms of stabiliser, and we've floated our fabric. And now we're going on to actually stitching the design itself, and again we've got two colour blocks, one for each half, and that's the first half we're going to stitch. Now again, look at this central area here. Can you see this motif here? There's only part of it stitched. There's another hot bit which is actually going to stitch with this side of the design that comes second, and again down here you've got a little bit that actually will stitch out with the second half. So it's really important that you have enough room for adjustment in this center overlap portion. So let's have a look at how we're going to stitch this out. We'll guide you through the process, and I'll show you how to do the adjustment when you turn the hoop round to do the second half to make sure it matches perfectly. So it's going to sew on this half. It can't sew on this half because it would mean it would actually crash the hoop into this part of the machine, so that's why it does it in two halves to get the size. That's just a positioning marker it's put in there, so that when we turn the hoop round we can match up that marker with the one for the other side. and I think we're just going to let that stitch out. I'll pause the camera and we'll come back to that when it's actually finished. Okay, so that's one half of the design done. I think you can see here we've come up one side of this motif here, but it's obviously got another piece to do on the other side, and it's the same on the back one as well. But it's come up with turn the hoop and change the thread. So if it's a different colour you would change it. This one's all monochrome anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So we can now embroider this side, but the first thing we need to do is do some lining up. I want to make sure that we start in the right place and match up with that first half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the design positioning, which is the little flower with the target in the middle. Okay, and we've got the 4 points that we're going to set. Point 1 on the screen, point 1 on the fabric, and then point 2 on the screen, point 2 on the fabric. So let's do point 1 first. It's almost on the alignment marker at the bottom, I think, so let's just zoom in. We can zoom into the cursor and you can see it's actually on the one that I'm about to stitch, not on the one that I stitched previously. So I'm just going to come so that it actually sits on the right point. I'm now going to transfer that to the machine. So let's just, I'm going to use my finger just to drag it across to start with and get it somewhere close. That's looking pretty good. So if I just, yeah, I'm just a little forward of it at the moment, so if I go back as well, there's nothing more precise than doing this with the actual needle. Yeah, let me just go a little bit further. Top tip is, if you do this with the cursor magnified, any movements you do on the screen are much smaller. And if you have it at full hoop size, it's all relative. So, we're nearly there, look, we're nearly there. Let's just to the left a tad. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to go to point 2, I'm going to go back out to full screen again, and ideally I need to locate it with something at the far end, up here somewhere. Now there isn't another alignment marker, but what I can do is move it up here somewhere, like the corner of that motif there. So again I can zoom in, you see it's actually quite a way off. I've got it close but not quite. So I'm just going to move that, and I can actually see that corner, it's that precise. I don't know if you can see, that says magnified 809%, so we've actually zoomed in quite a lot. I'm now going to put that in the right place on my fabric as well. So it's brought that right forward. With any luck, it's actually, oh look at that, that is absolutely bang on. But what I could do is I can drag it with my finger and get it absolutely in the right place. And now you can do it with more than one point if you want, having got it in what I think is exactly the right place there. So what it's doing is rotating the second point around the first one that we've already fixed. So if you imagine like I've put a pin, let's go back up to, I've put a pin in this point, oops, I've put a pin in this point here, and I've attached a piece of string to it and a pencil, and I'm drawing an arc with my pencil because it's centered on that point there. That's what we're doing with design positioning. So this is point 1, this is point 2 that I've chosen up there. Okay, I am going to just double check it with somewhere else as well. So what I'm going to do, I want to just check that it lines up with a point somewhere in the middle as well. Particularly if you've got a dense design, this pays off, because just in case there's any puckering of the fabric or anything like that, you can actually get this very precise. So if I now go to the same point on the fabric and drop the needle down, yeah, that's absolutely in the right place. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to press the tick. Now, the only thing that might happen with this is when you press the tick, it'll say design is outside of the hoop, because we haven't got the first design aligned correctly. I don't know if you can see, originally these motifs in the centre here were actually exactly in the middle of that grey band, but now because we've done the design positioning to match the second side, it's moved the whole lot this way. So sometimes the best thing to do is the first half of your design, make sure it's far over in that gutter as you can, dependent on how much of this side has to come in. You really don't want to be having the splits so that you've got bits of your designs using up the whole of this gutter. You want a little bit of adjustment. So sometimes a tip, if you've got a design that you really can't line up once you turn it round, is just make it a tad smaller, and sometimes it just gives you enough wiggle room in that gutter down the middle to do the adjustment when you turn it round. It's never a good idea to actually totally fill the hoop either, because yeah, that's going to cause you a bit of an issue. Right, so we're going to move the camera back into its original position, and we'll stitch out the rest of the design and see what it looks like when we've finished. So now we're ready to sew the second half. We've done all our positioning and everything, so it's a question of make sure you stitch in the right half, so the second one of the two, and press go. So again, this is your last check. Make sure these alignment markers have gone where you expect them to go. Look at that. Perfectly lined up. Those are the two bits that really mattered, because they connected to bits that had already been stitched in the hoop. The rest of it is now just going to fall into place, because if those two are in the right place, everything else will be as well. So we'll come back to that once it's done the rest of the stitching, and we'll have a look at what's we've done. So that's our embroidery just coming to an end, and wow, look at that, all joined up. Marvellous. So I'm just going to take that hoop off, and we'll put that back on the bench and we'll have a good look at it. So here we are, there's the finished article, all beautifully matched up and just in one hooping. But the advantage is, because you've not had to re-hoop the fabric, there's been no sort of gapping in the middle or anything like that. It's all gone exactly where it was supposed to go. So yeah, that's the Majestic hoop.